Today's guest is Brendan Maxwell. Brendan has been part of the Marl Accelerator since 2019, where he's been advising the cohort on the customer discovery process. He's had over 15 years in mergers and acquisitions and helping really build the customer and company strategy. He's been doing strategic planning, budgeting, forecasting, valuation, and due diligence, and is one of the best possible at how to actually listen to the market and actually design strategy based on how customers are using your product versus the idea that you have something to sell. I was on a call recently where he was actually working with a Marl Accelerator talking about the importance of doing customer discovery. He talked about stewardship relative to customer user experience, and I had never heard it quite that way. So I want to jump into what is your use of the term stewardship and what it means in the customer user experience. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. You know, the use of that word actually just popped into my head during that conversation, because as I was talking to, the cohort of startups around how you're thinking about presenting your company, your product, whether it's to investors, whether it's to customers, you are stewards of your business. You're stewards of that product. And you can even take that to when you take money in from investors, you're stewards of that money. And when you think about customer discovery and how you're going to market, you have to really think about what is the best use of the funds or resources that I have available, and how do I drive the greatest impact with those things. And I think especially for customer discovery for startups, people think, I need to go out and I need to spend all this money on marketing, all this money on, paid search or advertising or ads or trade shows. But the fact of the matter is you have to first think about who are your customers and where are they? And stewardship is targeting your customers where they are and not wasting either time, resources, money, and trying to just acquire customers for acquisition's sake.
Wow. See, I kind of love the fact that it really was an authentic conversation and it was an organic expression of where we were, because it came across as so genuine. And I think the hardest part with the startups that I've been working with in the Marl community is that when they come on board, they want to transition people to customers, right? And it's like, how can you really listen when you have an agenda? How do you coach people and teach people how to have the kind of listening that's essential in this process?
Yeah, that's such a big piece of it. And I think, especially for startup founders who oftentimes aren't used to listening like that. And I'm not saying like they can't hear, but active listening is a skill. Even for me at 15 years in my career, I have to work on listening every single day, because oftentimes I think we are almost hardwired to want to be right. And I think when that's where your ego is tethered, you tend to be resistant to information that contradicts your own existing views. I think of a saying, I don't know where to attribute it to, but it's strong convictions loosely held. And especially for startups, you need to listen to your customers. And it's hard to do that. And oftentimes I coach people to say, like, look, put your pens down, don't take notes, just have the conversation and hear what they're saying and respond to them in real time, not based on your own, like I said, preconceived views of what your product is. Because oftentimes, especially when it comes to like customer discovery, when I talk with, customers of Workday, my current employer, we learn so much about how they're using the product. And sometimes it's different than how we think they're using it. And when you're building a new product or a service, you need to understand how they're using it, because that's ultimately the value proposition. That's the value they're getting out of it. Even if you think it should be used as, X and they're using it as Y, that's a signal. That's a market signal that they're telling you they're using it a little bit differently. So maybe you need to re-examine the underlying assumptions or how you're thinking about your product so that you can continue that process and search for the product market fit and the scale and the growth. And you never stop doing that. You should be doing that from day one all the way until you're public $10 billion company, because markets change and user behaviors change. And it's critical to hear what your customers are saying and not have your blinders on and say this, and almost forcing them into the box to say, this is how it was designed to be used.
Wow. There's so much in the future of work and things are moving so fast. How do you keep your pulse on what's relevant as you're driving your thought leadership strategies inside of Workday?
So I think, for me personally, it comes down to reading and podcasts. I don't watch a lot of news per se. I might watch, some market news on the stock market, although that's been crazy and I don't really want to watch it anymore. But it's a growth mindset. It's a thirst for knowledge, however you want to describe it. Mm-hmm. It's just always wanting to learn something. And, with this thing we have called Google nowadays, like information is everywhere. And I find this oftentimes when I'm talking with the cohort sometimes where they'll ask me questions of, well, are there any books you recommend, or, what are some frameworks or processes as we're thinking about go to market? And oftentimes my answer is like, just Google it. The answers are out there and you can, read 5 different articles. They might approach the same problem from different angles. And at the end of that, time spent, you now can kind of triangulate all of the different concepts in your mind, say, actually, this is how I think about it now. And so, when it comes to podcasts, I listen to SaaStr a lot. I obviously listen to the Think, Build, Launch as part of the Marl. Tim Ferriss puts out a lot of good stuff out there. And I think the other one, which is actually really random, is I listen to this doctor. He's a Peter Attia podcast, and it's all about the science of longevity and life and health. But there's so much that they talk about that you can then just make a little jump to say, actually, if I thought about this in a business context, it's the same way. It's kind of connecting the dots and just being curious.
Can you repeat the name of that podcast?
Peter Attia, The Drive.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. I love, your point about cross-pollinating is great. And I like the idea of kind of a well-being framework being brought into business strategy. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I actually was just listening to a podcast last week. Tim Ferriss was interviewing Tony Fadell, so the co-creator of the iPod, iPhone, Nest Labs. And he has this new book out, like Build, an unorthodox guide to making things worth making. But one of the chapters in that book, and I actually just bought it and I need to read it still, they were talking about how, a CEO's mindset and a CEO's health and how when you start moving up in an organization, you get to a certain level in your career, you find yourself that you have to start making trade-offs and sacrifices between the work-life balance and your health. Because if you aren't healthy as a person, if you aren't taking that vacation time, that downtime to truly rest, to truly recharge your batteries, then it's just a recipe for burnout. And I think we see that all the time, especially with startups. Everyone does joke that startups are a young person's game just because it's a grind. And you have to be taking care of yourself to be able to perform at the highest levels in that grind. And I also think when it comes to rest, especially, we oftentimes don't let our brains just turn off. And in the time when our brains are turned off, we get our best ideas because you're not preoccupied with everything. And you're not trying to, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? You're actually just scientifically, you're allowing your brain to just start synthesizing things and ideas pop up. Tony gave a really good example on how Steve Jobs would vacation. And He would, you wouldn't hear from him for the first 3 days. Then all of a sudden, there'd just be a couple phone calls trickling in. And then by the end of the 7 days, it'd be five calls a day. But these calls weren't like, what's happening with the business? Do we make our numbers? What's the status? It was, he was reading on vacation and starting to conceptualize ideas. And it'd be like, hey, have we thought about this problem? Or should we get into music? And, that is the key part of rest, is it allows you to just be, and it allows you to actually start to think about the problems in your market or just random things in a different way. So,
well,
yeah,
so
rest is key.
Rest is key. And just in case the audience isn't aware, Tim Ferriss, I learned about him, about a decade ago. He wrote the 4-Hour Work Week and has been, I think, one of the first future of work speakers that was really kind of part of the disruption a decade ago about the whole workforce, which I think is great. And Ariana Huffington from Huffington Post actually kind of abandoned the production of that to actually dive into sleep and the power of sleep. And I just am so grateful. It's so great to hear a technologist who has such a long career in technology companies to actually be talking about listening, learning, and then the idea of rest as a strategy. I mean, I just think for all of you listening out there that these are 3, verbs that really are going to impact your great value creation, which is great. So after, I'm going to go back to kind of that, because we're in a pre-seed, we work with people at the ideation stage, getting them ready. The startup studio that I run here in Rochester is pre-seed. It's a little earlier than the Marl Accelerator that you've been on part of those cohorts. But besides the customer discovery and really listening, can you think back in like early ideation stage of people? What else is a good advice that you would like to give to people that are just now having a concept, wanting to build their idea?
I always tell people the reason companies fail is that they make a product no one wants. And just because you have an amazing product, that's only part of the value. You also need to figure out how to get your product into the hands of your target customers. Customer adoption of the product and subsequent revenue, clearly key to a customer success. But, it's the old adage of who understands the customer best wins. But when you think about a startup, asking questions early on that focus on the reachability of the market and whether or not there is a market are crucial in the early stages. Because a startup isn't really a business. It's a process. And the goal of this process is really like the search for a repeatable and scalable business model. And that search is almost, you can look at it as a progressive customer development process in which founders experiment with that minimum viable product in order to maximize their learning, their experiment, so that they can start to validate those learnings and kind of lead to the discoveries that find the business model. And, you can start with a clear value proposition, at the beginning of this whole, of your endeavor of starting your company. But a business model isn't a business plan. And a business plan is a business model. And you're going to have to, again, listen to your customers and hear what they have to say so that you can understand why they're tuning in, what their problems are, how you can solve them, how you can make it easy for them to listen in and learn. Because once you have this incredible understanding of your audience and you understand all the variables, it does help guide you in building your product so you don't get off track and just start building things that resonate with you, but don't resonate with everyone else. I think that's where I think founders really need to think hard about is people often get trapped in saying with, their tunnel vision of, we started off with the idea of X and we need to build X, but all the while they're building, when they're getting feedback, they're not like how we started off. They're not listening to it and really interpreting and translating what they're hearing and how that manifests in the product that's getting developed.
I have not heard that before, the way that you said, the idea that a business a startup is a process. Like if people could get that, I almost think that would make a great book if I don't know if you're thinking of writing a book or whatever, but business as a startup as a process, or even that might make a great podcast as well. Do you have a concrete example of someone that you know that really did listen and ended up pivoting as a result of hearing how the user was using it in such a way that it actually changed their business model? Is there a concrete example you can help our listeners get their arms around?
Yeah, so I might butcher the example. My brother-in-law is a startup co-founder multiple times over, and the current company, I think they've gone through 1, 2, maybe 4 pivots total. So they originally started a company that was focused on. Let's see. They were focused on trying to, I guess, enable video sharing and video recording for amateur athletes or early, young athletes in making highlight reels. And the market, they said, yes, the market is there. They had tons of users on the platform, but revenue generation was hard. So when they thought about, all right, well, what do we need to do? We're kind of maybe attacking this problem wrong. So then they went, and I believe they pivoted into how can we enable coaches to record games and then be able to splice segments of those games, tag the players in them, make coaching comments, on that, and then automatically send that out to the team, post game to say, hey, here's some of the learnings from the game. And, we can go from there. And again, they had great adoption. They had some universities using it, but still something wasn't there. They were subsequently, acquired, kind of an acqui-hire. And in the third iteration, they thought about, well, how do we just automate the filming of youth sports games to send live highlights to the whole team and for streaming. So if it's a high school, how can you get high schools to stream, HD quality, live stream HD quality games? And so they started to do that. They actually ended up 3D printing things so you could use it all on your iPhone and get multiple angles. And so that's kind of the current iteration. But if you think about it, yes, the theme from which they started off with has translated through all of these various pivots, but the market, the audience, who their target audience is, how they're going to market, who their end users are, has slightly shifted as they've kind of A/B tested the hypothesis of, is this the right market? Is this the right audience? Is this the right pricing strategy? Is this a freemium model, from a business model perspective? And so over time, they're now at this place where it's like, okay, we've got something here. And I think you can even look at, many other startups like, Slack was a video game company, but they realized that all of a sudden, when they're like, yeah, this video game thing isn't working out, they see that, oh my gosh, this communication platform that we kind of built to help us develop the game was critical to the success of the development. Maybe there's something there. YouTube was a dating site, but no one wanted to upload videos, but everyone wanted to upload videos of their dogs and cats. And so it's these things where you have to, if you're not listening to the signals you're getting, you're ultimately, almost dooming yourself to failure.
There's nothing like a real clear example. And I'm, obviously I'm the mother of an athlete who's going to absolutely want to find out how to help support our school, making sure that we know how to do this. Because it's, I should be thinking more about the conversation we're having rather than that innovation you just told me about, but my head went way over there, which is great. So, I at another time, because I'm wanting to talk about adoption and how you actually design strategies for adoption, but I almost feel that to do justice to that, we should probably have a second show. Because this, I just feel, the level of listening, the level of, and now I'm wishing that we did have video, only because when I'm speaking with you, Brendan, it's so clear that you're with me in the journey, that you're not looking at a past program that you had or what you said last week. Everything you're saying is really like you're with me right here. And I can totally tell that you're present on this conversation, and you're actually, what's the most relevant thing to talk to Jennifer about? Like I'm getting that experience. So the hardest thing is, I think people have to experience being heard in order to be great listeners. They have to have the visceral experience of, oh, that's what it's like to actually have someone walk with me. And I felt like you're walking with me today has just been really, really fun. So
yes,
hopefully,
thank you. I went to a military boarding school in Indiana, Culver, and they taught us, in order to be a leader, you first have to be a follower. And I think that is the same with exact same thing you said about listening is, in order to understand listening, you need to be able to be heard too.
We are so very lucky to be speaking with Brendan Maxwell today. Really excellent in the user experience and helping design growth strategies. And I'm hopeful that there's many, many more conversations we can have. I'm also from Denver, and I went to college in Boulder.
Nice.
So I wish this could be live, and I wish I could be in the Rockies at Red Rocks or something. But for another day, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for being at Think, Build, Launch.
Thank you. Yeah. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, cool. We're done with the recording, but it was so much fun. Like literally, I could see you picking up you were just totally with me, and then you're like, okay, that's a good example. It's so nice to see people thinking.
Yeah, no, I don't like. I normally just, for better or worse, wing it. But I think oftentimes people just want to go through the script, and I'd rather, I find my answers sometimes are better when it's just whatever pops into your head. Right. Well, there's a lot of stuff there.
I was going to say, well, one to capitalize though, your use of stewardship in the context of customer discovery is a new lens that I really think you can do a lot with. And it certainly, I was on the call with you. Hopefully you saw my face, boom, that was amazing. So,
yeah, I think, even as you were, because I think I was thinking about it in that call more from a money perspective. But when you asked me that question from a customer perspective, I think I need to pull on that thread a little bit and stew on that.
Oh, please do.
I think you can apply it in a lot of different ways. And I think especially with customer discovery and marketing and yeah, there's something, I maybe heard it wrong, but I heard it right. Yeah, no, it's right. But it applies still.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, listen,
I think it's important.
So we actually, we probably in the next 24 hours, you'll actually get to see and hear our podcast, and it'll be imperfect. We're learning, and but I'm having a lot of fun and really love being part of this community, and really nice to meet you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
As we close our program today, I'd like to thank Startup Grind Rochester, Upstate Venture Connect, Upstate Capital of New York, NextCore, RIT, and University of Rochester for your partnership with the Marl Startup Studio and collaboration to this tipping point that we have in entrepreneurship here in Rochester. Finally, I would very much like to thank our producer, Scott Fitzgerald at Rockbox Studio. If you have an idea and want to know more about our program, connect with me, Jennifer, at marlaccelerator.com. Please subscribe to our program, and we will continue to provide information and inspiration about taking your idea from a concept to a business. This is Jennifer Sertl. Thank you for joining us.